Call to order the meeting of the Greenwood Common Council on Wednesday, May the 8th. If you would please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. We'll be led in prayer this evening by Matt Giebler of Greenwood Christian Church. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you bow with me, please? Father God, thank you for this day in this place. I'm grateful, Lord, for this city. It's a wonderful place to raise a family, and I'm thankful to be a part of it. Lord, to live here is a blessing from you. To continue to keep and to make this a great place to live requires the work and participation of a lot of people. And so I thank you, Lord, for the men and the women here in this room, for their collective commitment to the betterment of the community that we're a part of. Lord, I know that there are always competing interests. There are always many, many things that require attention. I just ask for wisdom. I ask that you would help us to make together this a community that is characterized by kindness and compassion, by courage, by vision, by fairness. And I ask that all that goes on here tonight would be productive to that end. We ask your blessing in this place, and we're grateful to be a part of it. Again, I pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Roll call.
Armstrong.
Here.
Bates.
Present.
Campbell.
Here.
Dine.
Here.
Foster.
Present.
Gibson. Here. Hill. Absent. Hopper.
Here.
And Lexi.
Here. We have a quorum. All of you should have received copies of the minutes from our regular meeting on April the 15th. Do you have a motion? So moved. Motion, Mr. Bates, second. Second. Second, Mr. Alexi. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? Seeing none, then roll call on the minutes.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hopper.
Aye.
And Lexi.
Aye. Minutes are approved with a vote of 8-0. This time, if you're here in the audience and would like to address the council concerning business that's on the agenda tonight, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. There is a 5-minute time limit.
Good evening. For the record, Eric Prime, Van Baylor Law Firm, on behalf of the petitioner to a ordinance number 19-13. This is a zone map change request that is coming up for you for a notice of intent to consider this evening. I wanted to bring the council up to date on the current status of that petition, because I know all of you have been very busy campaigning and may have slept since then, since you saw this last. So what happened was that originally this proposal was requesting a zone map change from the current R2 to R3 zoning to permit single-family detached homes on the east or west side of Combs Road. The original plan called for 120 homes, which was a density of, I believe, more than 5 per acre. That proposal was, through negotiation with the neighbors and in discussions with the city, reduced to 112 lots. That proposal passed the Planning Commission with a favorable recommendation to this body. I appeared before you a few weeks ago, and there was a close vote, but it was 5-4 against that plan with 112 lots at R3. Arbor then went back to the drawing board. They listened to what the council had to say, and the proposal in front of you this evening is zoned up from R3 to R2A, which is just one notch below the current R2, and the lot count went from 112 to 94. That density is less than 3 per acre, which actually does comply with the current R2 zoning. The only reason we need R2A is because of some of the lot sizes. R2 requires certain square footage on lots, and we don't meet all of those with some of the lot depths. We're concerned that the lot widths are almost all 70 feet wide. So we are really close to the current R2. We darn near didn't need a rezone, but it's enough that we did. So we are seeking an R2A ordinance change, and with 94 lots. And just for your edification, all of the commitments that were made originally and that were accepted by the surrounding property owners and by the city are all still in place. Nothing has changed in that regard. There was no remonstrance before the Plan Commission on this plan, the 94 lot plan, and it was again forwarded to you with a favorable recommendation. So that's where we stand. We of course will meet all the criteria that the city has put forward, including their architectural standards, and certainly believe that this plan is best suited for that particular location on Combs Road, adjacent to a lot of the industrial uses.
Any questions for Mr. Fine?
I have one, if I could. My initial concern, and still have a concern, and I appreciate what Patricia's done already, but I've been out there and tried to look at the situation and looking into the future. I see a definite need for improvements in road conditions. County Line Road is a very narrow road to begin with. There are some places that if you were to get off the edge, you would probably actually, I know this is not our jurisdiction, but you would actually, end up stuck. And Combs Road itself, of course, it's a county road. Of course, we've annexed it now. And it's certainly not up to the same standards that we would have here as the city code says. So that's one of the biggest concerns I have about this, because again, as this builds up, it's going to create more traffic, and we've got narrow roads to begin with. Was that ever addressed, or was there any recommendations for that?
Yes, Mr. Bates, as you may recall, there was a companion development to this called the Retreat, which is in the south part, where Combs makes the double 90.
Yes.
South of that is the Retreat, which you folks already approved. That is moving forward in the development phase. Part of that development was utilizing that ground, a dedication of some of the ground in that development to make Combs a gentle S-curve in that spot rather than the two full 90s.
Right.
So the new Combs Road will actually go through the Retreat once it's completed, as well as part of the Westport development to the south. Combs Road to the north is chopped up between its city of Indianapolis, its county, and its city of Greenwood. So it's a little tough negotiating all those different municipalities, but certainly Arbor is on board with rectifying the road as it hits their property, from property line to property line, which is typical for the city to require, and they're on board with doing that. And I think what will happen is as those other parcels out there develop, those will fill in with being reclamated and widened. But as it stands now, it has been repaved. The majority of that from County Line South to the first
Yes.
90-degree curve has
And
been repaved.
I think that's appropriate, and that's good. But like I said, again, more concerned about the north end before it comes to where the development is proposed. And then, of course, Skyline Road. And I know that's not our jurisdiction, but I'd like to see that maybe some point in time, maybe like at least a 3-lane highway. Turning lane. Well, 3 lanes with turning lane.
Indianapolis would have to do that.
I understand that. But that's my overall concern right now, because again, we gotta look not just right now, we gotta look 5-10 years from now. What's that gonna look like then? And if we plan it properly for all that development in there.
Right. And we also, I forgot to mention, we had a late request for some green space or a playground area, because that area, at least for now, until other developments come in, will be a little isolated. And we are going to do that as well. So there will be a playground area for the young families and children who are in that area.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I just have one thing. I'm sorry I wasn't able to really talk to you much before the meeting, but I made the request for the playground area. When Westport came before us before and had 3 different variations, they finally got the density closer to where we wanted it. I think you're close to it too. And what really sold me up on that one was the fact that they were going to put in a playground for the kids and the families. So if we can do that here, I think I can support this project.
Will do it. All right. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else from the audience wishing to address the council at this time? All right, seeing none, moving on. Reports, Corporation Counsel.
Should have received the semi-monthly item report and also the litigation report on the SharePoint. If you have any questions, please contact me.
Any other reports? Seeing none, anything from the controller? Any other committee reports? All right, ordinances and resolutions, notice of intent to consider, ordinance number 1912.
An ordinance to amend the official zoning map adopted by reference in zoning ordinance number 82-1, proposed rezoning of 2.277 acres located at 200 East Broadway Street, sponsored by Dime.
Mr. Peoples.
Good evening, members of the council, officials of the planner of the city. I'm coming before you tonight to introduce this rezoning. It's a request of zone approximately 0.277 acres, a little bit more than a quarter an acre to the R4 district, to rehab an existing structure into an apartment building. Last month, the Board of Zoning Appeals did hear development standards variance on this petition that would have allowed it to be renovated up to a 9-unit building. However, the BZA denied that request. So as a result, should this rezoning be approved, staff estimates this building could be renovated into about 4 or 5 units. They would have to go through a commercial site plan or a residential site plan petition before they would be able to do that renovation. The building itself is known as the Old Hotel. It was apparently built as a single-family dwelling, but converted into probably a boarding house first and then apartments between 1930 and 1940. And it's and the reason I say a boarding house first is because it was really across the street from the old train depot. So when they were running passenger trains, that was the place where people got off. And so it's probably run as a boarding house for a number of years. And when the train stopped really servicing passenger service up into Indianapolis, it just transitioned to apartments. We consider the use grandfathered as an 8-unit dwelling for many decades, but it sat vacant. And it sat vacant for more than 6 months. And when it sits vacant for more than 6 months, it loses its grandfathered status. And that's really the reason for the rezoning for you. It's zoned R2, which is a single-family residential zoning classification. And if anybody wants to buy this property and renovate it, they have to renovate it back to a single-family dwelling. They can't renovate it into a multi-family dwelling unless they either get a rezoning or a use variance to do that. And use variances in Greenwood, it'd be hard to get financing to do that as a use variance, because use variances expire with ownership change. So subsequent owners would have to come back and get another use variance and another use variance and so on. So most people prefer to do the rezoning route. It was forwarded to you with an unfavorable recommendation. There was significant remonstrance. I believe I forwarded to you both the petitioner's presentation and the remonstrator's presentation. I did that as a web link because the attachments were too large to send to you via an email attachment. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. I did not see the petitioner here tonight, so I don't know if he's here to answer any questions that you have.
All right, before we go on, do I have a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right, that is my fault. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lexi, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Foster. All right, any questions?
Mr. Campbell, I
Yes.
would like to make a statement. This has been a bad situation in that neighborhood for a long time. The parking is definitely a bad situation, because if they don't have enough parking space behind their building, then they say they can park on the street, and that's just not a good thing. Broadway, there's a little bit of a hump there at the railroad track, and if there's one car parked there in front of this property, that pushes the cars out. And I think that we should look at the proposal that was given to us from the Plan Commission, and we should follow suit.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, then roll call, ordinance 1912.
Armstrong,
Nay.
Bates,
Nay.
Campbell,
Nay.
Diamond,
Nay.
Foster,
Nay.
Gibson,
Nay.
Hopper,
Nay.
and Lexi.
Nay.
Ordinance 1912 fails to pass on a vote of 0 to 8. Ordinance 1913.
An ordinance to amend the official zoning map adopted by reference in zoning ordinance number 82-1 as amended, proposed rezoning of approximately 31.54 acres located south of County Line Road on the west side of Combs Road, sponsored by Don.
Have a motion? Motion from Mr. Hopper, do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Lexi. Any discussion, or, sorry, Mr. Peoples, go ahead.
Thankfully, due to the audience request, I can delete probably about 4/5 of my presentation. Members of the council, again, Bill Peoples, I'm the planner for the city, 300 South Madison Avenue. This is a request to rezone to the R2A zoning classification. You've already heard all of the stuff that I was gonna say after this, so I'm just gonna tell you that the request was forwarded to them with a favorable recommendation by a vote of 6-2. That recommendation was subject to the commitments that were forwarded to you, that were submitted by the petitioner at the time of filing, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Prime mentioned is the city typically requires the developer to improve the road that connects, that's in front of their property. Is that in the works for this?
Yeah, it'll go through a primary and secondary plating on this one. This one has 2 access points, so there'll be XL, decel lanes. And if right of way is possible, to get a bypass lane on Combs Road. Sometimes it's difficult to get enough right of way to put that bypass lane, and we end up doing something, for instance, putting in a through lane on the north, or in this particular case, be the east lane, and then bringing in a left turn lane essentially to get into the subdivision. But yeah, and then we do have an actual standard detail that is a county option from taking old chip and seal road and bringing it up to city standard. So yeah, all along the frontage of this road, it'll be widened out to 12-foot travel lanes, XL, decel, some sort of bypass lane installed at this location. Now, obviously the issue is the multiple jurisdictions here.
Right.
So this little patch is about where our city limits touch Combs and doesn't touch it again, I think, until you get to the curve. So there will be sections that are maintained by Johnson County that north of this property and south of this county south of this property that aren't, that won't be touched until we start annexing and developing.
So that section south of their property that's undeveloped is not even the city limits, is it?
It's not, it's outside the city limits. Those 2 houses are outside the city limits, so that's a section maintained by Johnson County. And to the north, it's the same way.
Well, the project we've already approved for them, I forget the name, where they're taking the 290-degree turns, turn into a slow S, gentle S. That in south is improved all the way to Main Street, is that not correct?
Right, and that's all in the city. From that point, when we do the realignment of Combs, from that point south, it'll all be within the city limits, but it butts right up into Johnson County. The petitioner in that instance is negotiating with Johnson County to see what Johnson County wants as a transition into the county road. Yeah, we'll have that one will be handled as well, and we're sort of partnering with Johnson County about improving Combs a little bit north of where that realignment will come. So just so it's not just a shock, a 90-degree shock to people coming out of that curve.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Peoples?
Mr. Peoples, is it possible to put this diagram, do we have that, where you can see it on the screen?
Oh, Lord, I don't know if we do. Well, wait a minute. We do have the ridgetop thing right here, and you're talking about maybe that diagram?
Yeah, see the whole layout of the project.
Current slide. I think that's it.
I've got the small here, I'm just trying to.
No, that looks like it.
So where is the playground area on this?
I do not know.
I don't know that it's been designed yet. So
I mean,
I hate to make you do it on the fly, but I would like, maybe a minimum area and a minimum dollar amount you'll spend. I think, of course, Westport already had it built in, but they didn't have a dollar amount and a time certain that they were gonna put it out there. And I can't remember how much I asked them to put out. Does anybody remember?
I think you made a specific request as far as what
No
was
dollar
put
amount?
out there.
I recall a dollar amount.
They had a conceptual drawing, and you wanted that conceptual drawing installed with the first section. I believe that's what it was. before there was a house constructed.
I mean, that's for a dollar amount? That seems odd.
I don't remember the
They
dollar
could just
amount.
put a $100 swing set out there and call it a play area.
Well, I think they got a conceptual drawing that showed a fairly robust improvements, and you wanted that conceptual drawing constructed.
What I'm trying to ascertain is the egress, and is there only one?
No, there's two.
Okay, that's where I'm not able to discern that here.
They're just very close.
Yeah, it's,
Here and here.
they would have had to provide these two accesses because it exceeds
Okay.
50 lots. And once you get to more than 50 lots, there have to be two access points to the public road system.
Okay, I'm seeing it now.
Or a 85 road built to fire department standards.
Right, because I know this probably had to go through tech committee and all those things.
Well, this one's a rezoning, so it hasn't gone that, but when they end up doing, the primary and secondary plating, it will go through tech.
Okay.
They'll probably primary the whole thing, and then they'll build the secondary, or they'll knock it into sections for secondary approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Hopper?
Well, I don't have questions. I just want to make sure that it gets done.
I'm a little concerned about how they're gonna do it,
As far as,
or squeezing in the playground.
Where,
We've already got the lots laid out versus.
yeah, come on in.
can I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, please.
So we were just,
You need to introduce yourself.
Sorry to make you do it on the fly.
no, you're fine, that's fine.
State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Paul Munoz, I'm the title manager for Arbor Homes, 3405 Talladega Drive, I live in Kokomo, Indiana. We were just kind of looking at the site layout as it was, and the thought is to take the pond that is to the north and shorten that up, to where it would just be pretty much an oval, and then the easement that runs in between both those houses, put in a asphalt path back to that area, and then we would landscape and put the park area probably right there. I feel that would give ample room there for that to be the case.
This is the easement,
Yes, yes, sir.
so here roughly.
So we'd shorten that pond back up and then put it right back in that area and feel that we can make it fit right there.
Alright. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. If we would put it there, what would you, estimate the distance to the retention pond to be from the playground area? And would there be,
That could vary depending on how bad, or what the situation is with the drainage and any requirements that the pond would have to be as far as size wise. We would probably maybe look across that side or even around the playground, trying to put in a fence or something of that nature for small children.
I mean, I know fences are a pain to cut around and maintain and all that, and sometimes it's not a really good thing, but I'm just wondering about small children and being so close to the water.
We can fence in the area specific to the playground. That shouldn't be an issue. We've done that before.
How does everybody else feel about that?
The fence would be a good idea.
Parents.
Yeah, the parents, yeah.
How that too?
So, legal counsel, how do you suggest I formulate this motion?
Well, you can approve it, approve the commitment, subject to, adding additional commitments and add the playground in the general location as indicated by the petitioner. Add that as part of the commitment.
Okay. I will make that amendment to add those to the commitments then.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Hopper to amend ordinance 1913
Commitments.
to include commitments, approval based on additional commitments. Is that the way to say it?
But to include an additional commitment to include a playground area in the general location as presented by the petitioner.
It's north of the easement between lot 51 and lot 52.
51 and 52.
51 and 52.
Barely.
I would second that.
All right, we have a motion to amend as discussed by Mr. Hopper, second by Ms. Gibson. Any discussion on the motion to amend?
One other thing before we, sections, are you sectioning the neighborhood out so that, I mean, is that section 1 up there that's gonna be built first with the playground, or where?
That's the way the drainage is going, so yes, that would probably be section 1.
Okay.
it'll depend on how those utilities come through, but I believe so.
So completion.
To be completed with section one.
All right. Any further discussion?
Just for procedural purposes, this doesn't need to go back to the planning commission.
No, it does not.
All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, roll call on the amendment.
Bates,
Concerned, yes.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dunn,
Nay.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
Armstrong.
Nay.
Ordinance 1913 is amended on a vote of 6-2. Any discussion on ordinance 1913 as amended?
Oh, okay. I thought that was,
That was on the amendment.
okay.
You want to change your vote?
I for the amendment, I was voting for the.
Okay. Then it's the vote on the amendment was 7-1. Any discussion on ordinance 1913 as amended? Seeing none, roll call. Ordinance 1913 as amended.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Nay.
and Bates.
Again, a concerned aye.
All right, ordinance 1913 passes 7-1 as amended. First reading, ordinance 1909.
An ordinance amending the 2019 salary ordinance, common council ordinance number 1823, to change the position of certified latent fingerprint examiner to crime scene specialist, and to change the crime scene specialist pay in the police department, sponsored by Dime.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bates, second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion? Ordinance 1909. Chief. Thank you,
Eric?
Mr. Prime.
There you go. There's something still underneath one of those chairs. I don't know what it is or if it's your.
Oh, that's important, I wouldn't get rid of it. Thank you.
Thank you and Arbor. Appreciate it. Chief Lau.
I'm just here if you have any questions after the introduction.
All right. Any questions for the chief?
Is there a motion that was? Sorry.
Yeah, we have a motion in a second.
I was fixated.
All right. Any discussion?
Chief, is there any timing issues on this for you?
The sooner the better, that way we can start interviewing for the process and post it out.
All right. Any other discussion, questions? Seeing none, roll call. Ordinance 1909, first reading.
Dunn,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Bates,
Aye.
and Campbell.
Aye. Ordinance 1909 passes first reading 8-0.
I would like to move for suspension of the rules for consideration.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Gibson, a second by Mr. Bates to suspend the rules through second reading. Any discussion on the suspension? Seeing none, roll call on suspension.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
and Dunn.
Aye.
Rules are suspended through second reading. Do I have a motion on second reading?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bates, second by Ms. Gibson. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call. Ordinance 1909, second reading.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
and Foster.
Aye.
Ordinance 1909 passes second reading 8-0. Thank you, Chief. Ordinance 1911.
An ordinance to amend the text of Bremen Municipal Code, Chapter 8, Traffic and Parking Regulations, Article 2, to amend Section 8-8, prohibiting truck traffic on certain streets to include portions of County Road 75 East and County Road 250 East, sponsored by Armstrong and Campbell.
Do you have a motion?
Also move.
Motion by Mr. Armstrong, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dine. I will say that, I want to say that the inclusion of County Road 250 East was my suggestion, but after talking to staff and looking at the situation, we only control a portion of that road, and if we put signs on the south end of that road, it'll be there's be no place for trucks to turn around. They won't have any warning ahead of time. So I would request that we have a motion to amend ordinance 1911 to remove County Road 250 East.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lexi, second by Mr. Bates. Any discussion on the amendment? It's not that I want trucks up and down there, just it makes it difficult if they're coming from the south. They have no place to turn around. All right, roll call on the amendment to ordinance 1911.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
And Gibson.
Aye.
Ordinance 1911 is amended, a vote 8-0. Any discussion on ordinance 1911 as amended? Seeing none, roll.
Along the lines you were talking about, when they get to the north end of 75E at stop 18, that is properly signed for the entire length, so.
Yeah, they can't get on stop 18 anyway, and so that's a good, the one south of there, I was hoping to prevent trucks from heading south, but the problem is that those that are headed north, it creates problems, so. All right, any other discussion? Ordinance 1911 as amended? Seeing none, roll call, ordinance 1911, first reading as amended.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson.
Aye.
And Hopper.
Ordinance 1911 passes first reading as amended, vote 8-0. Second reading, ordinance 1908.
An ordinance vacating platted drainage, utility, and access easements located at 1235 North State Road 135, sponsored by Dime.
Do I have a motion, ordinance 1908?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Bates, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dime. Any discussion on the council? Seeing none, roll call, ordinance 1908, second reading.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
And Lexi.
Aye.
Ordinance 1908 passes second reading 8-0. Ordinance 1910.
An ordinance providing for additional appropriations from the Aviation Fund to budget classification 445, $15,000, 444, $95,000, 331, $40,000, and 336, $16,000, sponsored by Gibson.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Gibson, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hopper. Is this scheduled for a public hearing? So we'll open it up for a public hearing. If you're here tonight and would like to speak for or against ordinance 1910, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, public hearing closed. Any discussion on the council, ordinance 1910?
I believe that the previous council meeting, it was discussed the reasoning behind this request today. Is that correct?
What was that?
Just, I think, at a previous council meeting, you actually explained the reasoning behind this.
Yes.
And sufficient funds in other areas and a need for
Correct.
transferring them into these areas for expenditures.
Right, but their cash reserves, they would still stay above 35% cash reserves. And then by the time we get to the end of the year and we've got the state police online out there full-time flying through the summer, we think the fuel numbers will actually bring them up probably above 40.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion on the council? Seeing none, roll call, ordinance 1910, second reading.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
And Armstrong.
Aye.
Ordinance 1910 passes second reading 8-0. Resolution 1908.
A resolution declaring certain real property improvements and personal property for tax abatement, Indiana Becknell Investors, 2011 LLC, Pointer Sheet Metal Inc., sponsored by Hopper and Campbell.
Have a motion? Motion by Mr. Hopper, second. Second by Mr. Dine. Thank you. Any discussion on the council? Resolution 1908? Any questions for Mr. Sherman?
I think again, as this was discussed previously, this is for a speculative
No,
building.
this is
No,
Pointer
it's
Sheet
not.
Metal. This is an addition. This is a 54,560 addition to the current 100,440. So that's for current Pointer Sheet Metal.
This is Pointer Sheet Metal, right?
Yes,
Yes, I
And
mean,
they're expanding.
they're expanding, expect to add 40 jobs at approximately $23.18 before benefits, and the benefits are very good.
okay, thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Sherman? Seeing none, then roll call. Resolution 1908, second reading.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
And Davis.
Aye.
Resolution 1908 passes second reading 8-0. Thank you. New business, introduction of new ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 1914.
An ordinance amending the 2019 salary ordinance, common council ordinance number 1823, to increase the salary of the felony case manager position in the post-conviction service department, probation and drug court, sponsored by Gibson.
Anyone here to talk about this? Seeing none, we'll move on. Resolution 1909.
A resolution of the Greenwood Common Council waiving non-compliance of COI Greenwood 500 LLC regarding its failure to timely file its compliance with statement of benefits, sponsored by Campbell.
I do know a little bit about this one. The company had all their stuff in line, and just there was some misunderstanding and miscommunications, I think, and they have everything ready. They just need us to pass the non-compliance part. It was a timeline thing. Anybody else? Yeah, thank you.
Chad Sweeney with Genovis. We represent Van Trust, the builder of this property. As Councilor Campbell mentioned, well, first of all, we appreciate staff bringing this to the council and certainly appreciate your consideration of it. This is really just a procedural oversight in connection with filing for the abatement. The building is complete, the investment's been made. Generally, it's the process to file a compliance statement of benefits when the abatement is applied. The way the building was assessed, it occurred after the May 15th date last year of filing the compliance form. Staff asked us to go ahead and get that file to show that they were in compliance, which the company did on April 30th. So this action would basically accept that as filing late and allow the abatement to be applied. So we appreciate your consideration of it.
All right, any questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, miscellaneous business. Anything from the council?
I would just like to mention that the B-17, Craig, did that arrive today? Do you
Today.
know? Craig Hill? Did the B-17 arrive today at the airport? So the B-17 is at the airport. Tomorrow is media day. The weather might not be too appropriate for that. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday it will be flying.
All right, good. Anything else from the council? All right, audience requests. This is the second opportunity. If you would like to address something that was not on the agenda tonight, like to speak to the council, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. There's a 5-minute time limit.
Hey everybody, Matthew Smith, 450 Southgate Drive, Greenwood, Indiana. I first want to say thank you guys for your vote on Ordinance 1912 on the property on 200 East Broadway. But I'm coming up to speak to you about something that's not on the agenda. What are we going to do with the property now? It's a really big property, and it's been made clear by the people around that a multifamily development is not the right thing to do with that property, but it is too big to be converted into a single-family property, and just infeasible to think that that would happen, especially because of its placement in the floodplain fringe. And I know the report that the Advisory Planning Commission got from the city of the city had already moved forward on a unsafe building request to get that demolished. But the concern moving forward to actually do that was that they did not have the appropriations to do that. So what I'm coming to ask all of you today is that if the city comes to you to ask for additional appropriations to tear down this building that is really causing a harm to the community in the way of it's attracting rodents to the local. I live just a quarter mile north of this, and I can attest to tell you all the squirrels that I see going into the attic. It's attracting, as far as I've heard, some unsavory characters around the area. I know this building historically has had problems with squatting. I've had people tell me that they've gone into this building. I personally haven't, and seen evidence of intravenous drug users that have accompanied this property. And so, like I said, my request and why I'm speaking today is to ask you if the city comes to you to ask for additional appropriations, to approve that additional appropriation.
All right, thank you.
Mr. President, if I might, Matthew, I would like to give you a phone number and anyone else can use it also. It's 317-736-5155. And that's a non-emergency number for dispatch. And frequently I know those doors wind up open down there, and I think that I've talked with code enforcement and we need to call this number and alert them that when the property isn't secured.
Absolutely. I know passing by there today, as I pass by it every time I come to this building, the back door is, there's a big window in it, and it is completely broken and open to anyone who wants to walk in there now. So yeah, thank you for that.
All right, anyone else from the audience wishing to address the council?
My name is Ian Slatter, 819 Bow Street, Whiteland, Indiana, 46184. I know it's a Whiteland address, but I am within the city limits right on that southern tip of Greenwood. So I'm just a few minutes. I just wanted to bring to your attention a problem I'm having with a public-private partnership regarding stormwater in the subdivision of the Timber Valley. I'm actually the president of the Homeowners Association. I've been very pleased with the way the Stormwater Board has handled the situation. They've recognized the problem. I was at the meeting just a few hours ago, and they've given me some additional guidance. But the problem I'm having is actually with the Board of Public Works and Safety. I went before then, several months ago, and asked for permission to use the street to put the rock to get it through the subdivision to the ponds. There was an active discussion. The vote was actually 2-1 against that. Commissioner Rutherford supported the petition, recognizing that the north side of Carmel, Fishers, Noblesville, their policy to have plywood down on the street. So you put the rock on the plywood, and then you can get it across to the ponds. We do have an option of putting the rock in a common area and transporting it all the way around our retention ponds. But just in my discussions with various contractors I've spoken with, it really does increase the costs tremendously. It's just time, effort. In my case, it's probably going to be around $50,000, maybe a little less, but it's a significant sum of money when you're talking about a partnership between a homeowner association and the city. So simply coming forward to say, I think we've got an easier way of doing it. There really isn't anybody that disagrees. Even the two commissioners who voted against the request were very sympathetic. They understood they didn't really want to increase costs. They felt bound by the city ordinances saying that we can't have rock on the street. But to just sort of expand this out, not just my development and my situation, the reason this is now an expanded issue is because the street department is now taking action to remove product, whether it's mulch or potentially rock, from the street. In the past, all these jobs got done simply by companies effectively ignoring the ordinance and putting the rock there on the street and just doing the job. Well, now the street department is very clear about they're gonna be taking product. So now that's caused a ripple effect through a lot of the contractors, and we're in this bit of a stalemate. I think it's effectively, I mean, from what I'm hearing, it's sort of effectively shut down these types of projects in Greenwood. I mean, they can still physically be done, but the costs are much higher, and you have to really think about how you're gonna get rock, from delivery to the edges of these retention ponds. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention and just seeking a solution, seeking an answer.
All right, thank you. I will check into that and see what I can find out.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
we talked previously a couple of weeks ago, and I've seen other companies, when they've done the sewer work over by my house in the last 2 months, they've left sand, gravel, and dirt in one of the lanes while they were doing the construction overnight for a couple of days, especially down around Broadway and Perry. Other times I've seen the construction companies put barrels around the rock or around equipment, and while it is in the roadway, and they can get their construction done and do all of that. My suggestion would probably get both of us in trouble, but there seems to be a way we could do it without causing all of the uproar in all these different departments.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that and find out what we can do, but hopefully we can find a solution that will work for everybody, so.
Okay.
I will talk to somebody about that and see what I can find out. So, yeah, thanks, Bob. Anyone else from the audience? See none. Other miscellaneous business, Corporation Council.
We do have a list of CF1s to act upon. The first one is AIC income funds and telephone. We continued that from the April 15th meeting. Had a question about the information that was on the CF1. I believe that we did contact them to have a representative here. They are out of Conyers, Georgia, and said it was difficult, but they would send a letter. They have sent us correspondence by email that says they've looked at the information filed by their consultant and they disagree with the information, so they would like more time to look into that, to have a more time to address that and get back to the council.
Do we need a motion on that?
Yes, what is your pleasure? Did
So
you want
moved.
to, okay,
You have a motion by Mr. Bates to
Second.
postpone,
to when?
to when? I suggest give them a month.
Yes.
June 3rd, as I believe is our first meeting in June. All right, which is actually less than a month. So we have a motion by Mr. Bates, second by Mr. Lexi to postpone this to our June 3rd meeting. Any discussion?
That they should be notified of that time.
Yeah, we will. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, that is postponed to June 3rd.
Are we on a time limit to approve these? This would be the
Well, you
second
have,
month.
let's see, you have 45 days. I don't know when we got that one. Let's see if it's on the, I've got that one with me. Usually we have like that one of it.
And it's
By
like,
June.
action by the common council will be taken by,
That's fine. Let's see what date they put on
It was blank.
We received, we gotta put something on there, don't we, a stamp or a fax
Yeah.
date or anything? You email it to us, is that what we do?
it. Let's see. Go ahead and continue it, and then, you know what, we'll confirm the date.
Well, this was originally continued from the 420 meeting, so
Yeah.
that 30 days roughly would give us 520.
And I'm not sure.
6-3 is gonna be
Right at 45 days.
45 days,
I'm not sure the
unless it
date.
came in the
Yeah, unless-
day of or
and
day
I don't
before.
know the date that it was actually filed, so.
Can we get that for our next meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
If you need to change it, we'll confirm when it came in, there's no date.
All right, we postponed the AIC income fund.
As I recall, I'm inclined not to approve it if, I mean, if it was filed even before 420 and our next meeting is up on the 45-day deadline.
Okay.
I wanna make sure we vote on it now.
Yeah, as is, I'm inclined not to approve this abatement, this compliance, so. All right,
All-Star Properties, RP.
I find that, we're trying to do them,
yeah, we
I
have to.
find them in substantial compliance.
All right, we have a
Second.
Motion Mr. Bates, second by Mr. Hopper. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Oh, another thing, before I forget, we not get an email about that other Nachi one that needs to be put on, that was filed,
I believe it did, it was added, wasn't it?
is it on here?
Yes, it is.
Just make
It is on this one?
It's for, I think it's the work building, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure which one it was.
As long as it's on here, we'll get to it. All right, next.
Find, Exeter 998, RE Res, Resolution 1511, 16.
Second.
Motion Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. I wanna know why Mr. Bates took the easy one, All Star Properties, and I got.
Just a reminder, if you have a question, speak up quickly, okay? Because we're gonna move through these quickly. The next,
Find Indiana Becknell Investors 2011 and substantial compliance.
Second.
motion Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Find Nachi Technology, Resolution 1918, amended, Resolution 1017, or is that the date? It was
That's the date, it's a personal property
Okay.
resolution 0918.
Motion Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye.
Find Nachi Technology, Resolution 1114 and 1116, substantial compliance.
Motion Mr. Bates, second by, motion by Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Find Nachi Technology, Resolution 1211 and substantial compliance.
Motion Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Sorry.
Aye.
Personal property, there is another resolution. 1211, sorry. Aye. Find Nachi Technology, Personal Property, Resolution 1326 and substantial compliance.
Second.
Motion Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye.
Find Nachi Technology, Personal Property, Resolution 1327 and substantial compliance.
Motion Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye.
Find Nachi Technology,
Real estate.
Real Estate, Resolution 1211 and substantial compliance.
Second.
Motion Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye.
Find Nachi Technology, Real Estate, Resolution 1327 and substantial compliance.
Motion Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye.
Find ProStar Properties, Real Estate, Resolution 912 and substantial compliance.
Alright, I had a question.
Yeah, we have a motion, Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates, and a question by Mr. Foster.
For the estimated employee salaries and project, I mean, for 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and the current additional employees is blank, but it lists totals, so I don't know if they misfilled it out, or if they're leaving out information, but it seems submitted incorrectly. I mean, I could be wrong. And then also, for the salaries, it lists the actual, but it doesn't list the current and additional.
Let's bring it in.
I think it's safe to believe that if you look at 2013, you had 58 total employees. 14, you had 70 total employees. 15, you had 74. 16, you had 71. 17, 71. 18, 78. So they, it does look like it's above the 54 plus 10 that they had originally said at all points.
It's true,
I concur.
they had originally 54 current and promised an additional 10, and they currently have 79, so that's an additional 25, even though it's not separated out. Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Oh, boy.
Passes.
I find Three Amigos Realty, Real Estate, Resolution 728.
Motion by Mr. Hopper, second by Mr.
I got a
Bates.
question on that one.
Can't say that without doing the dance. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
in my head, I'm thinking, all right.
It says that, please notice CF1 was not filed for 2013. So would that mean that 2013 they paid full taxes, or which would mean that 2019 would have fallen off.
The county would be the one to answer that question, because they did not get the CF1, they determine whether or not they get the abatement.
So if they paid full taxes in 13, I'm fine with it. If they didn't, I'm not, because that would make it an 11-year tax abatement.
All right.
That should be on the GIS, shouldn't it? That piece of property.
We can postpone this until our next meeting and check on it. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Because you have until June 18th to act on this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Let
right.
me look on GIS real quick and see.
Motion by Mr. Bates, second by Mr. Armstrong to postpone this to our next meeting while we check on this. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Armstrong.
Veris Partners Real Estate Resolution 1813.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Applying Worth Service Supply, personal property resolution 1617 and 1621.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Bates. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that is it.
Move to accept conflict of interest for Mr. Campbell.
Motion, Mr. Hopper,
Second.
second by Mr.
Well,
Lexi.
I would clarify, because as it's written on the agenda, it's actually Mike Campbell, council member, for his spouse Margaret Campbell, who has been hired by Access Johnson County, and the city of Greenwood does contract with Access Johnson County and pays for annual services that are offered to the city of Greenwood. And that is the reason why Mr. Campbell is disclosing that. They receive money from the city.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Are you going to abstain?
Oh, well, no, I voted for it, so I'm gonna make Mr. Bates sign it though. All right, anything from the controller? Anything from the mayor's office? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Who's in charge back there?